Johan, no masks, no lockdowns. How did it go for Sweden in the end of this story?
Well, that's kind of interesting because when you look at the numbers, and no matter which measurement you choose, Sweden came out really well in terms of the number of dead. So it's kind of interesting considering how few restrictions that the Swedish authorities put in place.
Yeah, comparing to the rest of the world.
Yeah. And basically it's just a few countries that have a lower mortality during the pandemic. So it's kind of fascinating in a way.
Yeah. But do you agree that this was an inconvenient COVID victory for Sweden? Very inconvenient for the rest of the world?
Yeah, definitely, because so many newspapers and so many TV channels around the world were really bashing the Swedish strategy instead of taking a more curious and scientific approach to what was going on here.
Yeah, because the televisions were selling the fear.
Yeah.
So Sweden shows the opposite, exactly the opposite.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad because I totally understand this. Like you're allowed to feel fear, but you should also keep an interested mind and to keep a curious mind and see what's going on in the world.
How did Swedish health officials know that this was the correct way? It was luck, faith, or competence?
I think it's mainly competence and also a little bit of stubbornness. Because when you look at some other countries, for instance Denmark and Norway, their authorities also wanted to take this Swedish approach, as wanted some parts of the British government as well. But they didn't really dare following through. Yeah. So it was definitely competence, because when you look at all these pandemic plans from before COVID, there was no talk about masks, no talk about lockdowns, and no talk about anything like this. So what they did was pretty much just sticking to the plan and also having the guts to follow through on it.
So in your opinion, Sweden showed that millions of people in the world were denied freedom for nothing?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's your opinion, you can say that now, for nothing, because the result was the same or worse in the countries with more restrictions.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a fluke that Sweden had such a low mortality. I think the measurements, the restrictions probably had no effect whatsoever. So I think the reason why Sweden has had a lower mortality is probably because of the underlying public health. Yeah. And maybe some of the restrictions were detrimental to people's health. I'm not really sure about that, but maybe. So I think it's kind of fascinating that that we had this result in the end.
Yeah, but in your opinion, the confinements were health or was about health or political decisions? In your opinion,
you mean in the other
lockdowns? The lockdowns were decisions for health or a political decision?
I think it was mainly based on incompetence, because I think you can understand and explain a lot of things with incompetence, and I think lots of leaders around the world got scared. They didn't want to be the only ones who took like a different approach. Yeah,
like Bolsonaro in Brazil, because it was a different approach, and everybody called him genocide and crazy.
And Swedish scientists have also, like some Swedish sociologists have shown that the reason why a country instituted lockdowns was because some of the neighboring countries instituted lockdowns. So it was kind of like an epidemic of fear that spread.
Yeah, like a domino, because if they do, we have to do the same, because the people will ask us.
It was not correlated with the number of cases or the number of deaths at all. It was only correlated with how
the neighbors were
exactly. Yeah.
In your book you talk about herd immunity, so that was the secret for Sweden, because Sweden has a first wave, so they acquired in the first wave that immunity that protected for the following waves that, for example, my country has.
Yeah, especially in Stockholm, because Stockholm was hit really hard at first, and then the epidemic waned here, but some other parts of the country were hit like harder the second time around because they hadn't been hit the first time around. So this herd immunity took a while to establish itself, but that's definitely a part of definitely a part of the strategy. not that they wanted people to get infected, but they saw that this would end by itself, pretty much.
Why you wrote this book? What did you think? Why did you think to write this book?
It kind of felt like the story of the century, especially in Sweden, since the rest of the world just instituted these like crazy ideas that no one had tested before, and Sweden did the complete opposite.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really, really interesting to try and understand what was going on behind the scenes and why they did what they did, and the level of pressure they were under, and also how it turned out in the end.
Yeah. But in 2020, the predictions about the number of deaths that could occur in Sweden were catastrophic. I remember 300,000, the specialists. So
I think the best estimate from Imperial College was 96,000 dead within 3 months, and the actual number was 6,000. So they overestimated by 2,000%.
Yeah, but and they now apologize about those bad predictions. They admit the error.
No, they will never admit the error. But there is a really interesting scientific discussion underneath the surface between like some mathematicians in Sweden and so on. So if you're really interested in this, there's some interesting stuff to find.
Yes. Why do you think that the media around the world, the media tried to hide this Sweden success instead of acclaiming it to the world? Why, in your opinion, why they are hiding the Sweden success?
I mean, it's really difficult to retract something. And you see this with the Iraq war, for instance, the people who were like cheering it on. Yeah. None of them have apologized. Like some of them have, to their credit, said, we were wrong, this was a mistake. And to be honest, some people have said that in Sweden who were like critical of the approach and so on. But it's very, very rare. It's almost like a superpower to admit that you were wrong.
About the masks, Sweden proven that the masks were a waste of time and money. And some people say that they are also dangerous to the health. So Sweden never uses masks. They proved that the mask was completely unnecessary.
I have only worn a mask 3 times in my life, and that was when flying to European countries. And my kids have never ever worn a mask. But it was recommended at subways for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon, but pretty much no one abided by it. Yeah,
I saw it in 2020, and almost nobody went with masks. So Sweden proves that the mask was not necessary.
Yeah, I think the mask is kind of an interesting question, because I'm kind of surprised by how little it seems to work.
Yes, completely. I think that's too. About you talk about children. This the virus was harmless to the children. How did you see, for example, the schools closing and the confinement lockdowns of children in the other countries? You are father. How you see that? Schools closed, children closed at home.
I mean, it kind of pains your heart to see that kids were denied education for no reason at all. And even when people were back in school, they were forced to wear masks and subject to unnecessary testing and so on.
Yeah, that's I think the same. And what about how do you see the censorship for those who question the official narrative about the pandemics? Did you felt that censorship?
No, not at all. I think Sweden had a pretty good and nuanced debate overall. It's like very high-pitched at times. People were like really angry at each other. But that's fine. That's the way it should work in a democracy. But it was kind of scary to see how different dissenting voices were shut down on Twitter and Facebook for no reason at all.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to learn from this episode, that you should always like err on the side of liberty.
Much has been said about the comparison with the Scandinavian neighbors, but in the end the results were not so different, taking into account that Sweden doesn't have now excess mortality.
Yeah.
So in the end of the story, there is no much difference to Norway.
Yeah. And people
what the number says.
Yeah. But people who want to defend the lockdowns, they always try to compare Sweden with Norway and Denmark and Finland. But the thing here is that Denmark was way more open than almost all countries in the world as well. because they looked at the Swedish approach and they opened the schools right back again. And in Finland, the preschools were only closed for like a few days. So all the Scandinavian countries fared really well, and all of them were kind of open. There was some crazy shit going on in Norway, for instance, where they didn't allow young people to do sports, for instance. But still, they went to school. They didn't use masks overly, like too much. So all Scandinavian countries were pretty open, in my mind.
Very different from Portugal. In Portugal, 2 lockdowns, everybody closed, everybody with masks. So Sweden had a much lower vaccination rate than many European countries, 70%, I think, 73%. It was because they prefer to take the natural vaccine with natural immunity that you talked on your book.
I'm not really sure about that. I think it's like much higher, but it depends on how you count, because a lot of people haven't taken a 3rd dose. Yeah. And it also depends, because we didn't vaccinate children at all.
Yes.
So maybe if you add that into the final number,
the final number is 73. For example, in Portugal it's 93.
Yeah.
It's that because you had that first big wave and the people get natural infection, and they choose not to for example vaccinate children. I don't know what because it's 20% difference from Portugal.
I think in general the vaccines were a little bit overhyped in the beginning, because a lot of people around the world thought that this was going to kill the pandemic.
Yeah.
But the Swedish authorities actually said that this won't change too much in the equation here. So and that was very controversial too. So so they just like kept taking like controversial stances throughout. But I think they were proven right in that sense as well, because lots of like the pandemic has definitely continued after the vaccine was available to everyone.
What is the biggest lesson that we learn from this whole story, in your opinion?
That you shouldn't act on your first instinct, especially as a leader. You should take your time and assess the options, and try to keep an open mind to that and be able to to always maintain a position where you can retract and to be fair, some countries did this, like Sweden was open throughout, but Denmark, Norway and Finland, they changed their opinion about the pandemic throughout. And actually Denmark was actually the first country in the world to declare the pandemic totally over. Sweden was actually a little bit after Denmark in that sense. So there are other countries that have done a fairly good job as well.
About the ships the ships under the skin in Sweden, can you tell us what is it real that the Swedish people has the ships under the skin implanted in the skin?
No, that's not. I think there was like a news story about it, that someone tried it to for subway tickets or something.
Yeah, to open the doors.
Yeah. But I don't think anyone will follow.
So it's not in general use here.
No, and I think in general you should be careful about doing surgery unnecessarily.
Yes.
But I think there's like a big tech industry in Sweden, so it's probably someone just trying it out.
But not for now. Maybe in the future.
Yeah, but I don't think it will happen ever.
Yeah, but I saw that one thing I saw in these days, that the money, the physical money, is not.
Yeah, that's very rare. Actually,
they try to finish the use of the physical money just to pay.
Yeah, it's kind of
because in Portugal we pay with notes and coins, but here I never use the coin. No.
Yeah.
It's a change on the strategy, financial strategy.
Yeah, I used to be very positive about that, but now I'm kind of changing my mind a little bit about.
Worried.
Yeah, because maybe it's a good thing. Like if you're unbanked, that's like a thing in the U.S., for instance, that you don't have access to financial institutions. Then you have to be able to pay stuff anyway.
Yeah.
So. Maybe I'm slowly changing my mind completely about this. It's kind of